here, and today I just wanted to talk a bit about the general idea of questioning the historical narrative. I know a lot of people are just finding our channel and genuinely wondering, why would anyone think this way? And that's understandable. I had the same reaction. Most of us have spent so many years of our life being taught and graded on knowing history. Why would we waste our time learning something completely different? Is there even any actual evidence of discrepancies in the academically accepted history? If there was, would it be enough to open our minds to the idea that maybe a lot of what we consider fact is simply misdirection or even a complete lie? I find it funny how, when it comes to other scenarios, one lie or hoax and the whole entire subject is considered completely false. One television psychic turns out to be a fake, and suddenly all talk of psychic abilities is blacklisted from the realm of scientific fact. One Bigfoot hoax, and suddenly all accounts are null and void. It's funny how the vast majority of us still choose to believe in things that have had similar outcomes. Science, history, religion, all of these facets have been a breeding ground for lies and inaccuracies, and yet so many of us still cling tight to these belief systems. So what? Why is this even important? Well, so many of us base how we think about specific people on the facts that come out of these rigid systems. Many of us base how we react to everyday scenarios on these facts. For example, a very zealous Christian will choose to shame or ignore a family member based on the idea that their presence is unholy or could contaminate their own spirit. An impassioned historian may find it just to judge someone based on their ethnicity or what their ancestors reportedly did hundreds of years ago. A scientific fanatic is likely to treat someone like an imbecile if they don't believe in evolution. All of these belief systems have their own set of discrepancies, but are often ignored completely by their followers. Once we are unable to question the narrative supplied to us, it stops being something for our betterment and begins to be something to keep us in line. Is there even a good example of a well-known historical fact being not so reliable? I think so. I think there are some really good videos on this topic. Shout out to Observation Deck. All it takes is one lie to make someone question something that is not supported by the accepted figureheads. We should have the same skepticism towards our official narratives, especially since the payoff for such lies is so massive. If you control the perception of the past, you control the now and the future, and I think every individual should be able to decide for themselves how they want to view the world. So let's begin with Scaliger. Joseph Justus Scaliger was also known as Josephus Scaliger. One can't help notice this person shares the same name as the well-known Jewish historian Josephus Flavius. To me, it stands to reason that these two people could very well be one and the same. And we'll see this a lot as we continue to dig into the fabrication of history. It's a common point of contention that the most important, independent, extra-biblical scriptural references to a possible flesh and blood Jesus and company are found in the writings of Josephus Flavius, better known as Jewish historian Josephus. Specifically within his work Antiquitates Judaica, allegedly written in 94 CE, there are three commonly disputed passages: Testimonium Flavianum, 2. The John Baptiste passage, 3. James the Just passage. Very few, mostly non-Christian scholars have openly questioned the legitimacy of these passages. Now, I also wanted to point out the artwork in this book. It's charming and artistic in its own right, but in comparison to the other artworks also officially dated at this time period, they're rudimentary designs. I wonder why that might be. According to mainstream scholarship, Josephus was the only source outside the New Testament who confirmed the historically factual existence of Jesus. However, few academically trained scholars have questioned Josephus' historical account. Yet it isn't so wild to conceive that the Testimonium Flavium by Josephus was a product of Christian tampering or interpolation. As we look deeper, we will find that there is no shortage of deception when it comes to the writings of historians and monks. But that's for another day. I do plan to go over that in depth, but I wanted to make this presentation primarily about Pompeii. History is written by the victors is surely a saying that spans across all of time. Now, let's get into the most damning pile of evidence. The popular narrative concerning Pompeii is that Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, burying 2,000 people beneath a thick layer of volcanic ash. The city is said to be abandoned for 1,669 years. It was said to be virtually untouched, until a group of explorers in the late 16th century while excavating Herculaneum discovered an inscription that identified the site as Pompeii in 1763. This is commonly accepted as the beginning of modern archaeology. So basically, for as long as any of us have been around, it's been considered a hard historical fact that from 79 AD to 1763, Pompeii was supposedly lost to history until the serendipitous find of that very inscription. So if this is indeed a fact, like we're instructed, we should not be able to find any evidence or references to this lost city between those times. So let's just take a look at some maps that were created between those dates, just to double check and make certain that Pompeii isn't mentioned. So let's take a look at this. David Rumsey Map Collection, and this map is by Abraham Ortelius, who, according to official sources, was a Brabantian cartographer, geographer, and cosmographer, conventionally recognized as the creator of the first modern atlas, Theatrum Orbis Terrarum. This map dates 1527 to 1598. This one specifically is dated at 1570. If it is a fact that Pompeii wasn't rediscovered until 1763, then we shouldn't be able to find any evidence of it on this map. So let's find Vesuvius. Here we are, Vesuvius Mons, and right next to it is Pompeii. So this mapmaker knew where Pompeii was, but the archaeologists were completely in the dark. How can we take these archaeologists seriously if they're overlooking such an incredible discovery such as Pompeii? Let's check out Herculaneum, UK. There are many maps here that are dated within the time that Pompeii was supposedly lost to time. As we see in the Bay of Naples, 1514, Pompeianum, you'd think that the archaeologists would have referenced these, considering we practically take their word as gospel these days. As I mentioned before, we use history as a guide to how we function as a society today, and yet there's little to no consistency, and this is just one shining example. Let's now look at a map from 1603, a very short time before the vastly important chance discovery of Pompeii. Yet we can see it here as clear as day. Why would a city need to be rediscovered in 1763 if it was on a well-known map less than 2 centuries old? So I'm going to read a little bit from this article. Cirillo's article suggests a reasonable hypothesis which gives answers to these questions. In the article is discussed the very interesting problem of the dating of the famous Vesuvius eruption, which covered completely the town of Pompeii with a layer of volcanic ash and pumice stone. The author conducted extensive studies. He found and analyzed important evidence about the eruption of Vesuvius of 1631 and about the destruction by this eruption of surrounding towns. In particular, he studied carefully and analyzed the special features of the Canal of Count Sarno and its environment in Pompeii. I had the opportunity to follow the process of research and the creation of the hypothesis described in the paper. Therefore, I'm well familiar with the efforts of the author to gather and generalize the entire accessible essential information on the theme, especially information from the 16th and 17th century documents. This gives to me the merit to assert that the article, Features of the Dimensio Fontana's Water Conduit, the Canal of Count Sarno, and the Date of Pompeii Destruction, by Andreas Cirillo, presents the readers a hypothesis based on authentic evidence and facts, that the eruption of Vesuvius in 1631 is namely that famous eruption, which covered the town of Pompeii with a layer of volcanic ash and pumice stone, a hypothesis which should be thoroughly verified in the future. In accordance with this, I would recommend the scientists and people interested in archaeology of Pompeii should read the article of engineer Andreas Cirillo. Features of the Dimensio Fontana's Water Conduit, the Canal of Count Sarno, and the Date of Pompeii Destruction. This is put together by Jordan Taboff, and here are his credentials. Is there any hard evidence of an alternative date of the destruction of Pompeii? Well, apart from the fact that the cartographers already knew where Pompeii was, yes, there is, and it still exists to this day, because it's been, as they say, set in stone. The year 1631 is listed as the destruction of Pompeii on this memorial plaque, which is on the road to Naples, as we see here in this photograph. On the 27th line, Heracleum and Pompeii are both listed as victims of the 1631 eruption of Vesuvius, cities that were supposedly destroyed 2,000 years ago and lost to history. How could a town that wasn't supposed to be discovered for another 120 years be on this plaque? So let's see what the academics on the field are saying about this. Blogging Pompeii, a blog for all those who work on the Pompeii site, has a post here bringing up the discrepancy. Here we even have an account from an alleged eyewitness of the 1631 eruption. Everything on the way was swept away by the storm and the fire whirl. Stalks and flocks were drawn and scattered around. Fields, woods, huts, horses, towers were destroyed and thrown about. 2 of these fire flows were very quick. One of them vigorously ran down to Herculaneum. The other one ran to Pompeii. The cities once recovered from the ashes. I do not know if they will be alive again. And about Herculaneum and Pompeii, this is how I call both the ancient city and the one next to it, I will tell you a bit later. And then explains what to tell about Pompeii. Now, on the contrary, it was not only horrified by the roaring Bicron Vesuvius, but was buried without a splendid burial procession under the ashes, and there is probably not even one eyewitness of this misery left from the city of Annunciate, as it is called now. And such a great disaster did not happen during Nero, when the city was damaged by an earthquake, and when during a theatrical performance a casual argument between Nucerians and Pompeians became the reason for a bloody wrangle, first with stones and then with knives, and now the Pompeii itself looks very miserable. So let's remember, this is an archaeological blog, and this post is from 12 years ago. Yet no other archaeologist has had the courage or maybe the wits to comment further on this debacle. Radio silence. So let's check out these paintings inside of these perfectly preserved houses. Here's one that looks like some food and some animals. Pretty basic stuff, right? Remember now that the date we're running with for the disaster is 1631. So how about we take a look at a very popular character in Western history, Christopher Columbus. There's a lot we could say about this character, but for this presentation, we're just going to focus on the little factoid that I personally remember learning about in grade school. Christopher Columbus supposedly was the first man to introduce the pineapple to Europe after encountering it in the leeward island of Guadalupe in South America. He called it Pina de Indies, meaning pine of the Indians, and brought it back with him to Spain. This was supposedly the first bromelade to be introduced to humans outside of the New World. The official narrative says that pineapples were non-existent in Europe prior to 1493, upon Columbus's return to Spain. So, let's check out this 1st century fresco again. That is obviously a pineapple. It's not an ear of corn, it's not a ham, it's a pineapple. How could this be a 1st century fresco if the pineapple was exclusively a New World fruit until the 15th century? However, it would coincide with the date of 1631, giving the pineapple a good 140 years to circulate around Europe. This next image is wildly famous. It's called the Three Graces. This popular fresco, supposedly from the 1st century AD, is now in the Naples Archaeological Museum. The second image is a painting by Raphael, painted between 1503 and 1505, currently sat in the Château de Chantilly in France. Left is a 1st century fresco, and the pic on the right is a 15th century painting, practically identical. Is it possible that the Three Graces artwork in Pompeii was installed after this painting became famous? This would also coincide with the pineapple and fruit bowl discrepancy. So what do we have? We've got maps that have Pompeii listed as a functioning city during a time in which it's supposed to be an ashy pile of rubble. We've got a plaque near Naples written in stone, and an eyewitness account, and now artwork that could have only been installed in the city in the 15th century, unless Raphael was a fraud. All of this information leads to the conclusion that Pompeii was not destroyed in AD 79. The evidence is virtually irrefutable. Now there's another interesting thing. During the Second World War, between August and September 1943, the archaeological area of Pompeii was bombed by Allied forces with the aim of accelerating the retreat of German troops. About 170 bombs were dropped by British and Canadian bombers, hitting and damaging several points of the excavation area. Supposedly, they did this because the Germans were keeping a lot of ammunition there. They bombed Pompeii for over 2 days straight, and look how much damage was done. It was left in utter ruins. I can't help but wonder if this whole weapons story could have been an excuse for the Allied nations' forces to come in and destroy some ancient remains that still existed there. Regardless, Pompeii is just one example of a growing list of major misrepresentations in history, processed, packaged, and sold as irrefutable facts. How many more times does this need to happen throughout what we consider official recorded history? If Pompeii wasn't actually destroyed in 79 AD, how does that bode for other tales from that time? Many of these stories we use as jumping off points for understanding society and human nature. They say those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Well, what if there's no way to really even know the events of the past because it had all been intentionally misrepresented or even completely fabricated? What does that say about us? Is it possible to piece together the shambles of time? There are certainly those who've done their best, and I think most of us here now are in the same boat, intensely curious to find out whatever happened to us for things to turn out the way that they are now. So many of us are willing to dig deep into the past as we possibly can until something begins to make sense. If that makes sense. Anyway, thank you so much for your time and attention. Let me know what you think and if we missed anything you think is really important or interesting. Also guys, we did just start a Discord, so definitely join us if you want to have some conversations and just talk and hang out with people who are interested in a lot of the same stuff. Until next time, all we can hope is that our minds be unveiled.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?